Good afternoon, everyone. I call to order the December 2024 meeting and the first meeting of the Special Committee on Student Affairs of the University of Minnesota's Board of Regents. Thank you all for joining us, those who are joining us in the room, as well as those via the live stream video. Let me first welcome Student Representative Nico Vasilopoulos, who is traveling out of the country later today. But made sure to schedule his flight after this. So thank you very much. First from the Twin Cities campus. We're really excited to start off this committee, and the first item on our agenda is discussion of the special committee's charge, as well as our 2024-2025 work plan. As our charge makes clear, the special committee's role is to build the board's understanding and capacity in understanding and focusing on critical student topics. It supports the board's priority to increase alignment across the system to ensure outstanding student support services. And the special committee will build board oversight in this area and help advise on any action items related to students that flow through the board standing committees, especially the Mission Fulfillment Committee. And I will last note that the creation of this committee was as a result of region feedback and region conversations. So I think this reflects that, specifically during our retreat, that Regents said this is an area we want to spend more time on. And we know the excellent work is happening, right? Not just certainly Calvin, but also, all the student affairs professionals across the university. So that's certainly not the issue, but we want to be able to just understand it better and know how we can support and help you all advance this work. So really excited for this committee. As you'll see from our work plan, which was developed by myself, Vice Chair Farnsworth, and in consultation with President Cunningham and Vice President Phillips, the topics that we will cover seek to fulfill our charge. I'll actually note that many of these items come directly from topics that were highlighted from last year's student representatives report. Representative Yang is nodding her head, so I'm not making this up. We look forward to engaging with this year's student representatives, obviously on their upcoming report, but also on these items. And I think Vice Chair Farnsworth and I spoke with them and just made sure they understand to have an open line of communication, certainly on all committees, but certainly on this one specifically. With that, I will hand it over to Vice President Phillips to highlight a few areas of the work plan.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Kenyanya and members of the committee. We are delighted to have the opportunity to share with members of the board the experience of our students across the University of Minnesota system. Our students receive tremendous support from talented student affairs staff at all hours of the day and night. Our staff work tirelessly to offer students a community of care, and we are very thankful for the chance to have more detail about what our work is about with you. Throughout the year, we will provide history, data, and stories that will bring into light what life is like for students on all campuses. Each presentation will come from a system lens and involve voices from staff and students across all campuses. I'm proud to share that my student affairs colleagues and I have been working collaboratively for some time with a true systemness approach to our work. You'll see this as we move through the committee's work plan this year. I also want to know that student affairs is not limited to just one organization or unit. The information that we will share will reflect a collective approach to supporting students. You hear not only about the work of student affairs, but also about our collective work with partners such as academic affairs and equity and diversity. Specific to this committee work plan, as we move through the year, we will top topics that we identify as key areas of focus for student affairs work, both here at the University of Minnesota, but also nationally. I regularly meet with my peers at other institutions, and topics like student mental health, basic needs, community and belonging, support services are consistently discussed. Our team here at the university are doing great work in these areas, and we look forward to sharing these efforts with the committee as the year goes on. Chair Kenyanya, this concludes my remarks.
Thank you very much, Vice President Phillips. Colleagues, are there any comments or questions on the work plan or the committee's charge? Seeing no questions, we will move on to our second item on today's agenda, which is an overview of the evolving nature of student affairs services. over time in response to changing student demographics and needs. It is possible that committee members had different student affairs experiences during their time at the university, but that remains to be seen in this presentation. Vice President Phillips, would you like to introduce our presenters?
Yes. Thank you, Chair Kanyana and members of the committee. Our next agenda item will provide information about how the profession of student affairs came to be, including the important events and laws that mold our work. Sharing the 100-plus year history of student affairs in just a few slides is a lesson in brevity, as there are entire graduate courses and textbooks dedicated to this topic. In your docket, you will have including resources and links to those history buffs who want to learn more. This presentation will also focus on today's students, their backgrounds, characteristics, needs, and habits, and how these differ from the students of 30 years ago. The presenters will share a day in the life with two students, one from the Twin Cities campus and another from the University of Minnesota, Crookston. Joining me on the presentation is Senior Associate Vice President for Student Affairs, Maggie Tao from the Twin Cities, and Dale Scully, Associate Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs from the Crookston campus. With that introduction, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Senior Associate Vice President, Maggie Tao.
Thank you, Vice President Phillips, Chair Kenyanya, and members of the committee. We are thrilled to be here today to talk about the evolution and importance of student affairs. You can see by this word cloud that we are all about supporting our students when they are not in the classroom. We support them through student activities, residential life, health and well-being programs and services, dining, and several other areas where we advocate, support, and sometimes need to address student conduct code issues. You probably noted in the docket materials that there are differences between campus portfolios. For example, the Twin Cities campus does not oversee residential life, but all other campuses do have that in their portfolios. I will now turn the presentation over to Associate Vice Chancellor Dale Scully.
Thank you, Maggie. As student issues became more complicated on college campuses, deans of men and women positions became more commonplace to focus on student well-being and the adherence to community standards. This is commonly referred to as the beginning point of student affairs profession, and it typically took place in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Student affairs professionals have long believed that learning that takes place outside of the classroom is essential to the holistic development of the student. It complements the essential learning that takes place within the classroom and fully prepares the student for life post-graduation. Collaboration with colleagues across campus allows student affairs teams the possibility to create the highest quality student experience. I hesitate to begin naming these essential constituents, but facilities and maintenance, dining services, student success offices, academic affairs and faculty friends, as well as legal counsel and equal opportunity in Title IX, are partners that we know we couldn't effectively do our work without. Many incidents have happened in the history of higher education that have changed the way colleges and universities operate. For student affairs, the shootings at Virginia Tech and the response to the COVID-19 pandemic were major events that impacted our work. With Virginia Tech, student affairs began to rethink how we viewed our relationship with students, and particularly how we shared information across campus. Campus safety measures were strengthened, and student affairs professionals began to move towards reconsidering our commitment to the overall well-being of students, the academic, social, emotional, and physical well-being. Much more collaboration occurred through behavior and intervention teams, care teams, and student conduct processes to make sure that early intervention became a primary goal. The COVID-19 pandemic closed college and K-12 campuses, some for very lengthy times, creating challenges in student mental well-being. Student affairs professionals would tell you that they really felt like they were tasked with being responsible for the health and safety of all students on campus. The pressure this put on student affairs professionals was immense during this time. But we also noticed that students were becoming more easily isolated and were further struggling to connect and engage with what we would consider typical social communities. We find that much of our work is, quote unquote, teaching students how to be social again, how to meet people and make genuine, healthy friendships. Talking about legislation, legislation often determines the responsibility of our work within student affairs. The 2011 Dear Colleague letter outlined new guidelines that all colleges were required to follow. This immediately created new responsibilities and often new positions on college campuses across the country. In essence, it pointed out the prevalence and harmful effects of gender-based misconduct, the uniqueness of how these cases were to be handled, including the use of the preponderance of evidence standard, and how colleges were expected to provide resources for survivors of sexual misconduct. Some other legislative actions that added significant responsibilities were the Drug-Free Schools and Campuses Act, the Jean Cleary Act, Minnesota Statute on Post-Secondary Voter Registration, and the Stop Campus Hazing Act of 2024, which we just found out was passed yesterday by Senate. All of this legislation influences the ever-shifting responsibilities of the student affairs teams.
One of the biggest changes through the years has been with our student body. Enrollment numbers are much higher than the 1990s, which I'm sure you noted by the various graphs that we have in the docket. We also have a much more diverse student body, which has greatly enriched our campus. On some of our campuses, we support graduate and professional students in addition to undergraduates. Students today have many more complex issues and needs compared to 30 years ago. Many of those needs are related to health and well-being and basic needs, which Dale will touch on next.
Yeah, thanks. We've seen major changes with students today compared to decades ago. In terms of basic needs, when we speak of this, we infer most often the following: mental health counseling resources, emergency assistance funding, assistance with food insecurity and housing insecurity, skill development with time management and task prioritization, as well as dietary needs in dining and the prevalence of medical singles and emotional support animals in housing. In February, this committee will receive a full presentation on this topic. We also see differences in housing styles. Living learning communities have become commonplace on college campuses. The way roommate selection occurs is much different than it was in the past, and how roommates want to choose one another and select one another to live with during their 4 years of college. We've also seen restrictive diets that have become more commonplace. Students simply have far more dietary needs than they did years ago. Much of these are connected to medical needs, but some of them are dietary preferences, religious and or connected to personal values, e.g. vegetarian or vegan. There will be another presentation following this one today that pulls back the curtain on the mental health status of today's college students. So without going into great detail, we have seen tremendous expansion of our mental health counseling departments and programs due to student demand on all of our system campuses. Much of the growth we've witnessed in higher education has been due to, went to the wrong page, has been due to increased opportunities for students from underrepresented communities. The BIPOC population on college campuses has grown exponentially in the past 50 years. The increase in community belonging and multicultural programs has provided tremendous support for many students and focus on creating environments where all students feel they belong and are truly valued and celebrated for who they are. Care teams have also popped up and become more commonplace on college campuses. Behavioral intervention teams and wellness care teams are two preeminent groups that student affairs teams typically lead on college campuses. Often, we also are participants on academic care teams or retention groups. These teams exist to provide students with resources they need to be successful and to do everything we can to prevent students from slipping through the cracks, especially those that aren't very good at asking for help. The traditional college student of the past, the 18 to 24-year-old living in a dorm or a neighboring community, has changed dramatically. Online learning options, expansive funding programs like the GI Bill for non-traditional students, and students aggressively being courted to return to college later in life has made student affairs professionals continually reimagine the types of programs, events, and services that are offered for full-time working adults and often full-time parenting adults.
To further illustrate what Dale covered, we thought we would give you 2 examples of what a typical day looks like for some of our students. The student I will describe is a Twin Cities-based student. Abdul starts his day at Sanford Hall by grabbing a quick breakfast and a bag lunch for later in the day. He then heads over to Reckwell to run on the track and lift some weights before he walks to class. After class, he responds to a few emails from the student activities staff about a grant for an upcoming program his student group is hosting. The program will be held in the St. Paul Student Center, so later he interacts with the event staff to arrange the room setup and technical needs. He then heads to Boynton to get a flu shot, and then spends a few hours in the chemistry lab working on assigned experiments. After that, he heads to a 5-hour work shift at the Office for Multicultural Student Engagement, followed by another class. Before walking back to his residence hall to have dinner, he chats with a friend who is struggling with anxiety. So he pulls up the support resources available through mentalhealth.umn.edu to help make sure that his friend has what they need to navigate a difficult time. Later on, he participates in a small group session at Walter Library to work on an assignment for one of his classes, followed by a call to his mom to check on how his family is doing and to see if he needs to go home over the weekend to help with his younger siblings. He then wraps up his evening by stopping by Goldie's game room for trivia night. Abdul had 7 interactions with student affairs in just that one day.
Many students don't take the traditional route to college. One such student, a University of Minnesota Crookston fully online student, discovered that the flexibility offered her by a fully asynchronous online degree program was exactly what she needed. This student, we'll call her Anna, is a full-time caregiver to her twin sister who has significant medical needs. This responsibility has Anna working a 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. shift, serving as her sister's personal and primary caregiver. She indicated to me that, because of her family responsibilities, she really only has opportunities to pursue her education in the evening and on weekends. UMC's asynchronous, fully online communications major allows Anna the flexibility she needs to serve her family well and still pursue her degree. As if this undertaking isn't demanding enough, Anna also serves as a gymnastics instructor in the evening and works about 10 hours per week outside of the house. While Anna's experience is unique, it's but one of hundreds we hear from students articulating clearly that without the fully online platform, they may not have had the ability to pursue a college degree. This concludes our presentation. Chair Kenyanya and members of the committee, we welcome any questions or takeaways you have from the information we've shared with you this afternoon.
Thank you very much for the presentation. To start off discussion, I will invite Student Representative Vasilopoulos.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair Kenyanya, and thank you all so much for your presentation and for the work that you all do. Student Affairs is critical to all students here, and so we really appreciate the dedication. I wanted to ask a question. In the document materials, you sort of highlighted the differences in the portfolios of Student Affairs across the 5 campuses, and so I was curious if there have been any discussions or any plans for expansion around what's offered on the different campuses, and so that if something is offered on the Twin Cities campus, say, and needed or requested, and Morris, for example, but not offered, if there were any discussions or any kind of plans or ways to standardize that across the 5 campuses. And obviously the needs are different on each campus, but I'm curious what those discussions are like.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Chair Kenyanya, Representative Vasilopoulos, I'm so used to calling you Nico. But that's a great question. There's actually, I think it's called a system optimization work group that Vice President Phillips is serving on right now. And that's the exact thing that they're talking about, is kind of looking across the system and how we can better support and collaborate. One really good thing is that the Office of Student Affairs has been collaborating with our system peers for several years. We meet regularly with them and share best practices and support each other. And you'll hear a little bit more about that in the mental health presentation as well. So that is something we'll be looking at. I don't know if you have something you want to add.
Yeah, to add to that, and I appreciate the question. And one of the things that we see when we get together, we meet virtually 3 or 4 times a year and then in person once every year. And there's always that conversation that comes up about how we're dealing with certain matters within the student experience. The most recent one has been about mental health counseling and what we're offering to students. And so we're constantly coming back to what is that next item that we're going to be able to offer our students at the University of Minnesota Crookston. We're looking at a fully online platform for our students that I know is going to really affect our online students that are outside of the state of Minnesota as well. But I know that that's also discussions that Calvin and his team is having, the people at Boynton are having, and it's just a way that the systemness works, and we start talking about our needs at different institutions and how we can help one another out. So.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We've been talking so much about systemness all day, and whether it's through enrollment or through this, I felt that there were a lot of ways that we can maybe streamline some of that. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep. Regent Talurabe.
Thanks, Chair Kenyanya, and thank you, presenters, for the information. I'm curious. We heard some in our listening event at the St. Paul campus about how some of the critical needs of students are increasing and external groups or volunteers are stepping in to help support, whether it's food insecurity or some of those things. I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about if we do in fact work with any external groups, and what is that process, and do we welcome that, or do we want to do more of that in terms of just being able to figure out what kind of support would help students. Yeah.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Chair Kenyanya and Regent Talurabe, thank you so much for that question. I think that when it comes to basic needs, we're always open to suggestions that are even outside of what we have typically done within student affairs. One of the things that comes to mind with that question is most of us have case management teams on our campus. And so these are individuals hired specifically to work with the basic needs of a lot of our students. One of the things that our case manager does is work with the SNAP program to make sure that even within the community, that if there are nonprofits or social workers that can connect and offer services to our students, we're wide open to those types of discussions and offering those services. In terms of, we have a food pantry on our campus, as all 5 system campuses do as well. We often get donations and support from nonprofits and other people in our community. We do different types of drives or athletic events and stuff where they bring canned goods and different things like that. So constantly we have people outside of our campus that want to contribute to the basic needs of our students. I wouldn't want to sit here and say we have like a plethora of these that are formally made, but we want to continue to see ways in which we can make these connections.
Regent Talurabe.
Yeah, I think it's something to just explore. I mean, we heard about obviously food insecurity, but also things like getting health services. People talked about, we have Boynton here, but for example, here on this campus, it takes a long time, and just trying to figure out what are the options to be responsive to students, and then some thoughts about, is there a more formal path to building some of those partnerships instead of just being responsive? But I don't quite know, so I was just curious. Thanks for that. That's really helpful to know.
Thank you, Regent Talurabe. President Cunningham, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I maybe wanted to ask my vice president to comment a little bit too. I'm going to talk a little bit tomorrow. This team has done a really tremendous job over the past, 6 months or a year in expanding basic needs services. And I'm going to mention that a little bit tomorrow in my report, but I don't know if any of you have it off of the top of your head, but it might be helpful just to talk a little bit about there's more work to be done. We have requests into the state to do more work, and I know the team is planning more work, but I think it's also important for people to just highlight how much more expansion of those services has happened over the past 6 months in response to student requests. So I don't know if your team can address that, or we can, off the top of your head. I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Chair Kenyana, President Cunningham. We're going to be doing a presentation on basic needs at the February meeting, but I probably will call upon Michelle Trumpy to talk about what we've done in the last 6 months, if that's okay, Michelle, in terms of responding to
Call
your
a
specific
friend,
question.
sorry, not to push it.
Don't have that
Spot.
detail, so yes, thank you.
It's very good. It's great work, and I know there'll be a detailed presentation on it, but since this came up, even just a few things off the top of your head, I just think to give folks a flavor of how much work has been done on this would be great.
Yeah. Hello, President Cunningham and Chair Kenyana and Board of Regents. I'm Michelle Trumpy, Director of Public Health from Boynton. In my portfolio of work, we oversee the food pantry, and we have made a lot of efforts to expand over the past year. We offered 4 pounds of food to students, and now we're offering 9 pounds of food to students, which is a really important increase. We changed from 1 time a month to 2 times a month. Next semester, we're actually, this is hot off the press, we are going to open 2 additional hours. So instead of operating from 12 to 5, we're going to open from 11 to 5. Another hot off the press, we are going to have an event over winter break. We are looking at January 7th. That was a request from our international students. So, and to the question about community, our community partners are tapped and strapped. We connect with Keystone for our St. Paul campus, where they have a mobile food market that comes a couple of times a month, and we've asked them to expand that and be there more regularly, and they said, we just can't. Because the need is great in the community. And that's something that's a community program that only serves Ramsey County, not our Hennepin County. So that's another challenge that we have that we're continuing to look at and partner with community where we can.
And
President Cunningham.
if I may, Chair Kenyanya, and I know I'm speaking here to the Twin Cities, but I know that there's work that's been done. I've heard from our chancellors, and perhaps you can speak to Crookston, but I know that there'd been work done. I've heard both from our chancellor at Morrison at Duluth that there's been recent work in expanding the types of foods and other foods. So I'm sure we'll hear more about that in February, but I just want to highlight, I know this work is happening across our campuses.
Thank you, and thank you for jumping in. Regent Tayarabe, I think we'll have the detailed conversation in February, and mental health right after this. I'll just make the last comment so we can stay on schedule. You dropped in that line about the bill that Senate just passed, and I don't want us to overlook how much the regulatory side kind of drives your work, and that's a lot of effort, right? It's like, okay, this bill was passed, but now you have to go back and look at policies and whatnot, and I mean, ideally those are in line with our goals anyway. But I just, even in the past decade, it seems like every time administration has changed, we've gotten you Title IX guidance and whatnot. So just want to recognize that, focus on campus, but also trying to do that. And then if I could ask just a very brief question, can you briefly talk about how we work with non-student affairs professionals? And I think you mentioned the care teams or the case management teams, because I imagine a lot of times it's maybe a faculty member who's identifying a need, right? And maybe they're not fully trained in that, but they're seeing an issue. How's everyone else on campus kind of empowered to support this?
Thank you, Chair Kenyanya, for that question. I think that, when I spoke about all those key constituents to the student experience that work with student affairs, I can't begin to highlight enough how these relationships help us do our work. Legal counsel is somebody that I could not do my work without Carrie Ryan Galea and having her on speed dial and being able to connect with her anytime I had questions that come up about legal matters within student affairs. It's very important. I also know people in EOT on a first name basis and rely heavily on them to make sure that we're doing our work well. But yeah, also it comes down to those relationships across campus with faculty colleagues that believe in the care team process and are willing to make referrals and allow our case management and our care teams to really help reach out to students and connect them to resources. Sometimes faculty aren't the best people to make those first steps and those first connections. And we have people that will make phone calls, that will write emails. We have residence life staff that will find folks and make sure that they at least have access to what the resources are.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the time and presentation. I think we look forward to talking more about this, and we'll move on to our next item. For our next item, we will hear on an overview of mental health prevalence trends for our students across the university system. Vice President Phillips, would you like to start us off and introduce the presenters?
Thank you, Chair Kenyanya and members of the committee. Our next agenda item will focus on student mental health across the University of Minnesota system. The board have received regular updates regarding the mental health of our students, and we're happy to discuss this with you today. Today's presentation will provide an update on the state of student mental health from the recent 2024 College Student Health Survey conducted on all of our campuses by Boynton Health. Our presentation team will also provide an overview of the wide range of mental health services offered to students who are affected by poor mental health. And finally, we'll share with you a plan to transition the President Initiative of Student Mental Health, otherwise known as PRISM, into its next phase. Joining me for this presentation is Robert Dunbar, Associate Professor in the Center for Learning and Innovation and PRISM faculty co-chair from the Rochester campus, and Colleen McDonald, Assistant Vice Provost for Student Affairs and Executive Director of Boynton Health from the Twin Cities campus. With that introduction, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Associate Professor Dunbar.
Thank you, Vice President Phillips, Chair Kenyanya, and members of the committee. Today, we bring to you an update on our work to improve student mental health across the University of Minnesota system. An evaluation of student mental health data over the last several years results in a very clear conclusion. Student mental health challenges are on the rise nationally and within our system. For example, national data from the Healthy Mind Study in 2023 shows a significant increase in moderate and severe anxiety and depression symptoms in students. Specifically, we've seen 38% of students experience moderate or severe depression symptoms, 34% of students experience moderate or severe anxiety symptoms, 50% of students will be diagnosed with mental health disorder at some point in their lives, and 61% have sought mental health therapy or counseling and/or psychiatric medication in the past year. These national trends are consistent with what we are seeing system-wide. We've seen a significant increase in major depression and anxiety, as well as anxiety-related diagnoses such as panic attacks, PTSD, and social anxiety. To talk in more detail about the University of Minnesota student mental health data, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Colleen McDonald.
Thank you, Vice President Phillips and Chair Kenyanya and members of the committee. The College Health Survey conducted by Boynton Health in 2024 demonstrates remarkable trends that are consistent with the nationwide prevalence data. The survey is administered every 3 years, and this is the first survey that was administered post-COVID. The prevalence of mental health across a lifetime and within the past 12 months has doubled, and this is self-reported data. We know that adolescence and young adulthood are often the ages when serious mental illness symptoms surface. And the numbers that you're looking at in the presentation, going from 26% to 58% within a lifetime, these do not include the diagnosed cognitive disabilities such as ADHD or autism spectrum. As Dr. Dunbar mentioned, the highest diagnoses that we see are depression and anxiety, and anxiety-related disorders. What's newer to this data is the prevalence of social anxiety, panic attacks, and more generalized anxiety. Go to the next. Consistent with the national trends on campuses, mental health surpasses other physical health concerns, including upper respiratory infections, chronic conditions, injuries, and sexually transmitted infections. 26% of students have experienced 14 or more days a month of poor mental health. In past data reviews, we have seen a slightly higher number for undergraduate versus graduate students, likely due to graduate students having experienced mental health and now have learned how to function and perform better with mental health symptoms. Consequently, we're also seeing a higher acuity of mental health symptoms on campus than previously seen. We've seen students come in ready to meet and engage with services, and then we've seen students coming in learning about their diagnosis as they've come to college. So we offer a great number of services across the system to address these diagnoses. One is all system-wide campuses offer a range of services to meet various needs and readiness to engage in services. Services are offered include walk-in counseling through Let's Talk and urgent same-day counseling options. All system campuses offer counseling, therapy, and students have free access to Learn to Live, which is a self-guided skill-building platform that provides evidence-based tools to manage anxiety, depression, and other conditions. All campuses offer psychiatry either through on-site services, contracted services, or through referral. And campuses offer a variety of groups that include grief support, peer support groups, skills in navigating academic stress, and some offer identity-based groups.
One initiative that was established to address these issues is the President's Initiative Student Mental Health, or PRISM. It was tasked with focusing on critical areas in student mental health across the system. Those included and still include prevention and upstream efforts, research, allyship and early detection, services and treatment, and communications. I'd like to share with you a few examples of the initiative's accomplishments over the last several years. The first accomplishment I'd like to highlight is our system-wide resource navigation tool. This is a website where students, faculty, and staff access a single entry point to find mental health resources. This website has campus-specific information to help users navigate where to go to get help. Once logged in, the tool provides information based on the user's specific campus location. Several PRISM task force members focus their time on enhancing and developing training to better equip faculty and staff with resources necessary to effectively support students. This training is another notable accomplishment of PRISM. I'd like to first highlight our micro training videos, which provide quick bites of information no more than 5 to 8 minutes in length. The video topics include how to make effective referrals and rationales as to why faculty and staff should be more involved with supporting student mental health. These short videos serve as a great resource for individuals looking to gain quick knowledge and for immediate application. The second resource for faculty and staff is an extension and elaboration of the Mental Health Advocates program that began in 2015 on the Twin Cities campus. This expansion offers a combination of campus-specific data with a unified package of professional development training for employees across the system. There are 8 training modules available, each approximately 20 minutes long. Examples of these modules include listening effectively to student mental health concerns and impact of identity and oppression on student mental health. Across the university system, 1,132 employees have completed at least one mental health training module, increasing their knowledge of student mental health and building skills to support student well-being. Over the last year, we have worked to identify the best path forward for the President's Initiative for Student Mental Health, or what was known as PRISM. This work included consultation with the original task force members, as well as a specific transition team made up of additional faculty and staff from across the system. The transition team has offered the following recommendations that we are working to put in place. The first recommendation is a new name for the endeavor. The new name is to be called the Student Mental Health and Wellbeing Initiative. Additional recommendations include the continued promotion and prevention and skill building, as well as an assessment of existing resources. The transition team also recommended a new structure to coordinate and connect mental health work across the system. This structure places student affairs on the Twin Cities campus in a coordinating role, working closely with a faculty member who will serve as a consultant or advisor. Lastly, I want to share some additional transition news. As you know, I have served as the faculty co-chair for this initiative alongside Senior Associate Vice President for Student Affairs, Maggie Tao. Maggie has been with the initiative since it began almost 4 years ago, and Maggie has plans to step away from her role and be replaced by Colleen McDonald. I'd like to give special thanks to Maggie for her wonderful leadership that has undoubtedly contributed to the successful initiative, and welcome Colleen to the role.
So I'd like to share some of the elements of the state legislative request, which will be talking more in depth in a few moments here that we've proposed. I want to share that all campuses have contributed to this request, and the fundamental part around mental health is to expand the mental health services. Some examples include hiring additional counselors, psychiatry providers, and staff to assist students who need additional assistance in coordinating services on or off campus. Other examples include adding staff who can do substance use screening and supportive services for students in recovery. This proposal aligns with our aspiration to adopt the Okanagan Charter that was developed to support health promoting universities. Currently, 2 Big Ten universities have adopted the Okanagan Charter, and 13 other Big Ten universities are participating institutions. So we are one of 3 that do not participate. It was brought forward by one of our chairs, our student representatives to the Board of Regents at a previous meeting. Adopting this charter would mean that we would make an institutional commitment to supporting health and well-being in all policies, and perfectly supports our new focus on healthier here, there, and everywhere. To end today, one piece that I would like to share is an example of the support that's offered on the different system campuses. All the different campuses use service animals. You can see a collection of these 4-legged friends here on the slide. Morris uses a therapy dog, Archie the Golden Doodle, who attends crisis mental health or other emergency calls. And on the Twin Cities campus, we have PAWS, which is Put Away Worries or Stress, which celebrated its 10-year anniversary last year. Students have had almost 11,000 visits to PAWS this year, and a lot of students express how the connection with service animals really helps them to relax, recharge, and feel a sense of belonging. So this concludes our presentation. Chair Kenyanya and members of the committee, we welcome any questions or comments you may have from the information we've shared with you this afternoon.
Thank you very much, not just for the presentation, but for all the work leading up to it. Then we'll start with Student Representative Vasilopoulos.
I like this first twice in a row. Thank you, Chair Kenyanya, and thank you so much for your presentation. I have 2 questions. I'll ask the first one. In all the document materials, a lot of the data and charts say U of M system students, and so I'm curious if you also have the data broken up by campus, and if the trends are different on other campuses, or if it's very similar to what we're seeing in the docket.
Thank you, Chair Vasilopoulos, sorry. Yes, we do have system-wide, system-specific data. There are some variations, and the system campuses have access to that. I can't speak to those offhand, but I'm happy to follow up with some information if that's helpful.
Thank you. Just kind of curious to see if those would be different on different campuses. And then the second question, a recent topic of discussion among students has been the availability of long-term care, specifically for counseling appointments beyond kind of just shorter visits. And so I was curious if you can speak a little bit to what the current limits might be and if they're different on different campuses, and whether it's different between student counseling services or just general counseling support, if there are limits for students and what those limits are. And would love to hear a little bit about what your view is on the university's role and responsibility in some of that longer term care beyond, say, 15 visits, 20 visits or so for the lifetime of students.
Please.
Thank you, Chair Vasilopoulos. Great question. I think that's a great question that you're raising for several reasons. One is that, as you heard, we are seeing a higher acuity of student mental health symptoms on campus that we didn't previously see. So what we did this last year, and I'll speak to the Twin Cities and then open it up. So there are 2 actual services currently at the Twin Cities campus. There's counseling services and there's Boynton mental health services, and those are integrating over the next year to help improve access for students based on the feedback we've received from students. Boynton runs on a billable model that is it's based on medical necessity. And so we have removed our specific session limits because it's based on medical necessity. However, there are certain situations of specialties that we don't offer that we do a lot of referral and connection, and we have special grant funding support to help students access those services. For example, eating disorders. We don't offer eating disorder treatment here, so we work really closely. We get funding from a foundation, the Edelstein Foundation, to help students access that, and they can use that to apply for transportation and cover any copays that they have. So there will be another example is if we have a student who experiences a psychotic break, a first episode of psychosis, we will refer to mHealth Fairview's early navigator program to help them get services right away. Counseling model is different. The counseling model is intended to be a short-term model, and so they are continuing to meet those needs. And so really we have needs in between. And I would say that from what I understand from the campuses, they are also following more of a traditional counseling model. I think here we have limits around a certain number of sessions per year. And then we also identify during the treatment if those sessions need to continue or not. Do you want to answer to Raj?
The only thing I'll add, thank you, Representative Vasilopoulos. The only thing I'll add is that this highlights some very important sort of path moving forward, which is looking specifically at promotion of health and prevention, which would help considerably potentially reduce the long-term need for counseling. It's something that we've discussed as a committee, as a group, and in the transition team. So we look forward to seeing what we might be able to do on the front end as well in the long term.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
President Cunningham?
Yes, so thank you for this great presentation. There's been so much work that's come out, and I know the PRISM work will continue on even as it gets resorted into where that it's located or around the university. And then at some point, you folks will bring forward what's needed to get us into the Okanagan Charter. I know there's been background conversations, but I look forward to how we can be participating in that and what the barriers are to us participating in that.
Thank you. Before I turn it over to Chair Mayron, Professor Dunbar, you mentioned health promotion, and that's kind of where my question was going, and how we think about what we can do to obviously, promote wellness and, lower these numbers on the front end. Like one example that stuck with me, this was some years back in another board presentation, but someone had shared with us, for example, that faculty were going away from 11:59 deadlines because, when those are going to get submitted, right? And so either just things like that you might not think about and certainly weren't put there, with any intention of adding stress or anything like that. Is there a little bit more you can say about outside of counseling services, how the rest of the university and even, leadership like the board can think about how we create an environment that promotes wellness?
Thank you, Chair Kenyanya. I think that among the faculty in the curricular space, there are initiatives that we talk about regularly to reduce stress among the students. That's a continuing conversation and obviously something that's going to have to keep happening over time. I think that in addition to extrinsic variables promoting success of the students, we're also looking into sort of strength building in the students and other areas that we might be able to do that as well. So on the front end, we're helping the students through extrinsic, sort of changing schedules. And on the back end, we're trying to discover and facilitate activities that will promote strength building in those students at the same time.
Thank you. Chair Mayron.
Thank you. Actually, it's a follow-up to the comment that President Cunningham made at the end, and that relates to the Okanagan Charter. To get an understanding of why we have not, why we're not even a participant, much less one of the universities who have in fact signed on to the charter. What's prevented that from happening to date?
Director McDonald.
I think, Chair Miron, I'm newer to this role, so I would say that I myself learned about the charter about a year ago after being in my role for a year. So I am not sure what has prevented previously, but I am really excited to have this new focus on health and well-being. And you might not remember this, but when the board was going around asking for feedback, I actually asked that we would really like somebody who would move this vision of health forward. So, and here you are, President Cunningham. Magic, right? Yeah, they listened. So it really is as Dr. Dunbar was sharing, there's that sort of the meta view and the micro level of what we need to be doing. And so the meta view is how do we start looking at health policy and That could be, the number of exams a student has a day. It could be, my service providers will tell you, we don't have another break in the fall, and I see my students decompensating. Could we move one day here to give a break? So I think that I'm really excited to embrace this new version, and it's a very innovative charter that's known internationally as well as nationally, and I think it'll bring great improvements and transformation to the university. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, colleagues, for the presentation. Professor Dunbar, Director McDonald, thank you very much for the conversation. Was there something
Why
additional?
are you guys smiling? I'm looking at Calvin and looking at Rebecca.
I missed something. Was there an additional?
Yeah.
Vice President Phillips.
Yes, Chair Kenyana and the committee. Yeah, there's been a lot of work of trying to, as they say, bring new ideas to the table and things of that nature, and to really think about how we can better serve students. And I think right now you're starting to see us really taking to heart what our students are experiencing and looking at the data. And at the same time, I have to say that we're doing a good job of getting people out there at conferences and things of that nature, and to understand what are the new things down the aisle that we should be taking into consideration that we need to bring back here and things of that nature. I haven't been here a long time either. I shouldn't say that out loud, because it is about almost 4 years now. But, it's one of the ideas that I wanted to bring on. I just happen to have some really good people who have the same energy that want to be able to see us move in that direction. I think you're going to see a lot of good things that are going to be coming out of not only the Okinawa Charter, but ideas that I think are going to be generating in student affairs to revitalize and rethink about our profession. Because and I know is the student body is changing pretty rapidly, and we got to adjust as well. And that's one of the things that I'm charging our staff to think about, even myself. How do we line up in a way that we help students to be successful here at the university?
Yeah, President Cunningham, please close us out.
I'll close you out. And so I want to give the board food for thought here as we go to an issue that will come up again. So we've heard a lot, and I've heard a lot from the provost also on the interest in the fall break.
Yeah.
And I just want to, as we look at how we actually can improve health of our students and how important those mental health breaks are, I want people to also understand that also backs us up against the academic year and our state fair. And also that is a systemness question, how we can align our academic calendars.
Yes.
And so all things are possible. But we'll have to think about these things and how we balance them. And I've heard a lot of interest in our systemness conversation also, and how we align our academic calendars, which also bumps up against the state fair. Now, I love the state fair, not totally for the state fair and how it interacts with the university, but there are other effects around our system that happen because of the way that scheduling is for us. And how do we overcome those and still enjoy a really great state fair, but also provide a mental health break for students in the fall? I know you guys are amazing, and you're going to come up with an answer.
Unfortunately, after talking about breaks, this committee will not have one. Thank you very much. I think Executive Director McDonald stays as we move on to highlighting some items on the biennial budget request. Vice President Phillips, will you please introduce the agenda items?
Sure. Thank you, Chair Kenyana and members of the committee. Our next agenda item will focus on student experience component of our current biennial budget request. Our hope is to provide the board with a high-level overview of how financial investments from the state of Minnesota could significantly impact the current needs of our students and enhance their experience across the entire University of Minnesota system. I want to emphasize that this request will benefit all of our students. While the presentation today will share ideas on how we might be able to utilize the funds and the need for such funding, the initiative we discuss are intended to be system-wide and will be implemented in a way that will best serve the needs of each campus. Joining me for this presentation once again is Colleen McDonald, Assistant Vice Provost for Student Affairs and Executive Director of Boynton Health on the Twin Cities campus. Leanne Moline, Associate Vice Provost for Student Success in the Office of Undergrad Education on the Twin Cities campus, and Sarah Newberg, Executive Director of Care Service Administration on the Twin Cities campus. With that introduction, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Colleen McDonald.
Thank you, Vice President Phillips, Chair Kenyanya, and the members of the committee. I'm excited to share this comprehensive system-wide proposal to improve the student experience. This proposal represents an intentional effort to meet the current and future needs of the students so they can be successful in their education and future careers. So first, we'd like to focus on the basic needs portion of the request. Basic needs, as you know, continue to affect students' ability and capacity to succeed in their college experience in many ways, as 35% of students system-wide reported in 2024 through the College Health Survey that their academics were impacted by food insecurity in the past 12 months. Data from the College Health Survey demonstrates that system-wide 25% of all students experience food insecurity and 29% experience housing insecurity. Local context plays a pivotal role in how and when students are able to access needed resources such as nutritious food, affordable housing, transportation, and other expenses. This proposal seeks to expand offerings on each campus and remedy this issue in the following ways. On the Crookston campus, funds would support microgrants and emergency funds for transportation, housing, food, clothing, healthcare costs, and childcare. In Duluth, funds would allow the campus to hire a basic needs coordinator, purchase additional fresh frozen food for champs, and fund student workers at the free store where students are able to find free household and clothing items. Funds could also pay for on-site emergency housing. For Morris, funding would allow the campus to hire a basic needs navigator to support the UMN Morris Food Pantry, Food Justice, and other basic need programs. In Rochester, funds would support the current food pantry model and offer greater access to supplemental and culturally responsive food options for students. In the Twin Cities, funds would be used to increase the hours and locations of the Nutritious You food pantry from 2 times a month to several times a month, and to expand to the West Bank and St. Paul area campus. Funds would also allow the campus to hire a small team of 2 to 3 community health workers to assist students in accessing resources such as SNAP and other programs. The other portion of this request is the mental health request, as you heard around the needs that we're addressing. To address the burgeoning need for mental health services, the proposal of $7.5 million seeks to increase the number of mental health providers system-wide to meet the critical need for services and treatment. The majority of funds requested will significantly expand the mental health workforce on each campus by hiring additional counselors, case managers, and psychiatry providers across system campuses to increase access. These recommendations originated from the PRISM Services and Treatment Group, where all campuses weighed in on solutions to improve overall access to mental health care. Additional funds requested focus on the following areas: hiring well-being navigators on the Morris, Crookston, and Twin Cities campuses to assist students in accessing basic needs or help with sleep, stress management, and other needs. Where there are gaps in substance use recovery services, campuses such as Morris and the Twin Cities have requested funding to hire chemical dependency counselors and student coordinators to support and provide programs for students living in recovery. Other requests include creating recharge and well-being spaces for students, creating peer support groups in Crookston, and funding the system-wide crisis line and surge counseling services when current services are full.
So similar to the mental health support, there's also increased demand and need for student support throughout the undergraduate experience. In this post-pandemic world, students are needing more academic support. They're looking for more holistic coaching and general guidance in navigating the college experience. And so for us to meet students where they're at and promote their success and retention, we propose these 3 areas of investment. The first priority is to invest in individualized support by expanding professional and peer support staff. This will allow us to provide more personalized guidance to students that address their specific needs and challenges, while also creating a sense of belonging and connection to the U of M. We have seen this model work across the system with the growing field of student success coaching. While the focus of coaching may differ from campus to campus, it consistently offers holistic support to students. So these coaches assist students in discovering their strengths and interests, navigating the daily challenges of college life, enhancing their study skills and time management, and shaping their overall college experience. Investing in more individualized support for students is a proactive approach that has seen positive outcomes for students, including increased retention and campus engagement and feeling supported by the institution. A second strategy is to invest in programming efforts. We know from historical student data that some cohorts of students have lower retention rates and could benefit from additional support, such as first-generation college students or students from low-income backgrounds. Offering intentional programming and cohort experiences can build a strong foundation and community for students to persist and to thrive. So for example, on the Twin Cities campus, we recently piloted a summer bridge program where students came onto campus prior to the start of school. For 3 weeks, they had earned 1 credit and they experienced support in terms of preparing for that academic experience in college. Most of these students were first-generation college students, and they learned about the academic culture and expectations, that hidden curriculum, how to navigate resources, and most importantly, they built a strong sense of community among staff and their peers. Of those students, 100% of the 67 participants said that this helped them significantly with their transition to college, and that they 100% said they'd recommend it to their friends. So those types of support programs really can create intentional student success programming, such as the example I shared, and can be tailored to the specific needs of each of our campuses. And finally, we need to enhance our data analytics and infrastructure that allows efforts to be targeted, efficient, and seamless. Maybe not as shiny and fancy, but behind the scenes, we have seen initial success of our data analytics and using that to identify barriers and where we can provide just-in-time support for students. In addition, we want to expand our A+ tool, which is our behind-the-scenes student success platform, to provide more system-wide features and training. And lastly, to build a unified app for students to bring together multiple platforms to create a more integrated and mobile experience. While each campus will have a unique implementation strategy, these 3 evidence-based areas are crucial for fostering student success and ensuring graduation. We're also requesting an investment in creating more active learning classrooms, where students can experience an active and engaged learning environment. Active learning classrooms are student-centered, technology-rich classrooms designed to help facilitate discussions among students and promote student engagement with their learning. I hope most of you have seen these classrooms where students sit at round tables with movable chairs. Each table has a whiteboard and they can have a flat screen TV. I'm sure you've experienced this as a student, I hope. And the teaching station allows the instructor to project the work at each table and to be able to really create an engaging environment. There is growing demand for these types of classrooms from instructors. For example, on the Twin Cities campus, large capacity active learning classrooms have a 100% utilization rate during our peak hours, which does not allow for growth and for accommodating faculty requests. This investment allows for a system-wide plan to update traditional classrooms to active classrooms and keep up with the changing needs of a vibrant learning environment.
Chair Kenyanya and members of the committee, I'm happy to be here today to talk about the career readiness needs of our students. As you may know, Career Services here operates on a decentralized model with 4 career centers out on the system campuses and 8 in the Twin Cities. My office is Career Services Administration, which coordinates resources across the system. This decentralized model allows us to tailor services to the needs of the students at the local level, but can present challenges in providing equitable services across the system. Today, I'd like to share plans to address these challenges, starting in the area of employer relations. Through surveys of our employers, we know that most of our employers prefer to recruit students from all majors, but find it challenging to navigate the multiple entry points to our campus and our system. This ultimately results in lost opportunities for students as well. Related to this is the need to increase availability of career-related experiences, such as internships and research, which are so important to our graduate outcomes. To address these needs, we propose increasing employer outreach to actively promote students to our employers, to connect students to faculty research, to support students who face financial barriers, and develop programming that is open to all students. We have a good precedent for this in our work collaborating across the system for the U of M job fair. We'd also like to seek to enhance our student-facing efforts. The field of career services is undergoing a shift nationally in recognition that every student should receive comprehensive career education. not just those who voluntarily visit our centers. To achieve this, we propose development of a tracking system and to encourage students' progress on career milestones, such as developing a career plan or engaging in career-related activities. This would come with staffing to proactively reach out to our students who are flagged for additional assistance. These initiatives will ensure that we're doing our part to prepare students to pursue their aspirations after they graduate.
So this biennial budget request outlines a vision to create a vibrant student experience that meets the growing needs of our students and supports them in their overall success. And as we wrap up, I want to introduce you to Kat. So Kat is a first-generation college student here on the Twin Cities campus who is in her second year studying political science and psychology. And Kat is one of a handful of students who is both in our President's Emerging Scholars Program and our University Honors Program. She has 2 campus jobs. One is a peer mentor and is actively involved on campus. She meets regularly with her student success coach and will be doing a research opportunity this summer with the McNair Trio program. So here's how Kat describes this type of support. It's hard to find the right words to describe what President's Emerging Scholars has meant for me and what it's done for me in just my first 3 semesters here. It's the first place where I truly feel welcomed and appreciated for what I have to offer. And the community, from the mentees to the alumni to the professional staff, is what makes me proud to be part of this program and this university. My peer mentor and my success coach were my 2 biggest cheerleaders when my family back home didn't understand what my accomplishments meant, in higher education meant, and I am eternally grateful for their continued support. The connections I've made through President's Emerging Scholars alone have made my college experience exceptional. So we want every student to be like Kat, in the sense that they have the sense of community, the support, and they can really be their best selves. To do so, we seek the significant investment in the student experience in which we believe could transform the lives of our students and the University of Minnesota experience. So this concludes our presentation. Chair Kenyanya and the members of the committee, we welcome any questions or observations you may have about the information that we have shared.
Thank you very much. Regent Verhalen will open up our discussion.
Great, and thank you so much for sharing Kat's story, and thank you to Kat for allowing you to share it. I think, this is a theme that is really important, but is really a challenge, which is every student deserves a champion. But in order to do that, we have to be able to give our faculty and staff space and time to be able to resource being champions for the students. And as we ask our administration, our staff, our faculty to do more and more with less and less, it makes it even harder for them to find time to do that important work and be there for students. And I really, really wish our legislators truly understood, and I hope that they do, especially with the additional conversations that you, President Cunningham, and others are having with them, as well as ourselves, about how important it is to not even reinstate what has been cut over the years, but rethink what ways we need to be resourcing our students and our faculty and staff throughout their entire journey here at the University of Minnesota. And so thank you for bringing Kat's story to us, because I think it's a really great way to highlight those items in a very meaningful and substantive way. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Regent Verhalen. Yes,
one quick comment, just to follow up on that, because I totally agree. And this is something that I think we need to find a way to tell this story really well, not just here, it's good to hear it here, but figure out how we can bring it to communities and how we can bring it to legislators so they do understand and hopefully provide more support for this kind of thing.
And Regent Johnson will have a chance on February 18th. Is that correct? All right, on Support the U Day. So, I mean, this is helpful for us, because we see these items in the budget, obviously, but, I think we have better language now to advocate when we do have conversations with legislators. Chair Mayron.
Just building on what Regent Verhalen and Regent Johnson said, I am just struck with the challenge that we're going to have with the legislature. I think to bring home and to get them to understand that what it takes to be a successful student, to succeed as a student here, and that the traditional things that someone, if they've been in the legislature a long time, are going to say, you know, you provide an education, you provide training, you provide education, outreach, research. Why on earth do we need to also provide these other needs in order for our students to succeed, and getting them to understand, take a much more holistic approach and to understand what's changed over the last many, many decades. I mean, you talked about the presenters going back 30 years. I mean, I'm here more than 50 years ago, and the only support we had supposedly was an advisor, for which I'm pretty confident I never saw in the entire time I was here.
It says more about you.
Yeah, well, could be. But getting them to understand that the whether, you know, it's interesting with the demographics changing and are being able now to support and bring in more underserved populations in a first time, come with it a variety of issues that just tuition itself is not going to address: food, housing, those sorts of things that go hand in hand with those individuals that we are now able to offer the traditional education to. So getting this message across and putting it in context for the legislators, I think, is just going to is our real challenge.
Thank you, Chair Mayor. And I think as you were speaking, I was thinking the student rep started a regent shadowing program. Might have to start a legislature shadowing program and just really have them go to class throughout the whole day and see all the touch points. I think is the first presentation where we outlined the 7 touch points that student had in just one day. So thank you for pointing that out. And I'll just close us out by pointing out, I mean, here in the docket, there's under mental health, there's this paragraph that talks about the link between support and the academic outcomes. And I'll preface that by saying, I'm sure we all believe that supporting a student, regardless of, even if it didn't help them perform better, I mean, it's the right thing to do and want to support them as a person. But it seems that we know it does actually help them do better in class. And, it's not rocket science, but, it seems like we have the data to back that up. So, I mean, I think it's important for that reason. And that's probably an area that can help us in that advocacy with the legislature. We are at time. I see the president leaning towards the microphone. President Cunningham.
Chair Kenyanya, 2 things I'll remind folks again, with much thanks to our government relations team and this team and our new VP of Communications. You now have one-pagers that beautifully highlight these exact facts that you can have. We were happy to provide you with stacks of for whoever you are talking to. They're beautifully done. And then we have to continue to think, while we look for money from the legislator, we also have to make sure these stories are clear to our philanthropy community. The amounts here are not insane amounts. And then we have to figure out, these are things we can't not do also. And so without external support for them, like many things, we're going to have to prioritize internal support. And as we do that, we'll have to make other hard choices about other things that don't happen. But we have to support the students, which I might add, not only helps their student success, which is good for them for graduation. It makes, if you graduate successfully, that means your debt is not, you can pay back your debt, and you're supporting our future citizens in our community. So.
Thank you, President Cunningham. Thanks, everyone, for discussion, for the presentations. This is just the first. I mean, Regent Verhalen, you pointed out the relationship with workforce. And this is juxtapositioned with our other committee. This takes people to do. They're not just initiatives, and we recognize that. So thank you for being here, and we're excited to have this committee for the rest of the year. We will stand adjourned, but mission fulfillment starts in 10 minutes.
Finance.
We're done. We're done.
Oh, you don't want to do it again?
We can get it better.